December 16, 1944, 5:30 a.m. First Lieutenant Lyle Bouck, Jr. pressed his face into frozen Belgian soil and watched an entire German army emerge from the fog below. He was 20 years old. He commanded 17 men. And in the next 60 seconds, he would make a decision that would change the outcome of World War II. The smart choice was obvious. Retreat. Fall back. Live to fight another day. But if his platoon retreated, there was nothing between Hitler's last great offensive and the Allied rear. No defensive line, no reinforcements, no one. Just empty roads leading west. Bouck looked at his men. Teenagers, most of them. Scouts, not infantry, armed with rifles against tanks. Then he looked at the German column below. Hundreds of soldiers, armored vehicles bearing the SS lightning bolts. More troops than he could count. Every fiber of his training screamed, "Run." Instead, he gave the order that would echo through history. We hold. To understand why 18 Americans were about to face Germany's entire offensive alone, you need to understand three things about Lanzerath Ridge. First, the geography. Lanzerath wasn't just any hill, it was the hill, the only viable route for German armor through the Ardennes forest. The other roads were too narrow, too steep, or didn't exist. Tank divisions needed solid roads. This was the only one for miles. Whoever controlled Lanzerath controlled the German timetable. Second, the deception. While Bouck's platoon shivered in their foxholes, 200,000 German soldiers had massed in the forests across the border. Nearly 1,000 tanks, 3 entire armies, the largest offensive Germany would mount since invading France. Allied intelligence had detected nothing. The Ardennes was considered a quiet sector, a rest area for exhausted divisions. The same assumption that led to France's collapse in 1940. Third, the men Bouck's intelligence and reconnaissance platoon weren't regular infantry. They were the division's best, selected for expert marksmanship, high intelligence, peak physical condition. Many were college students pulled from the Army's specialized training program. Their job was to observe and report, not to fight, definitely not to stop an armored offensive. They had rifles, a few machine guns, and frozen fingers that could barely pull triggers. No artillery support, no anti-tank weapons, no backup plan, and now, no backup. The 820th Tank Destroyer Battalion had been supporting their sector. That morning, as German artillery began pounding Allied lines, they received orders to withdraw. No one told Bouck. When Private William Tsakanikas scouted the village that evening, he found it nearly deserted. The tank destroyers were leaving. A handful of cavalry remained, but they'd be gone by morning. Bouck radioed headquarters. "Hold position," came the response through crackling static. "Continue observing." Hold position, with 18 men, against what was coming. At 5:30 a.m., the world exploded. 1,600 German artillery. Pieces opened fire simultaneously along an 80-mile front, the largest barrage since the invasion of France. The sound wasn't just loud, it was physical. The earth shook, trees disintegrated. The air itself seemed to scream. Bouck's men pressed into their foxholes and prayed. They weren't the primary target. The Germans didn't know they were there. But the barrage tore apart American communications across the entire front. Phone lines cut, radio towers destroyed, command posts obliterated. The Allied command structure was blind. When the shelling stopped 90 minutes later, the silence was worse. Then came the engines. Through his binoculars, Bouck watched German soldiers emerge from the tree line. Hundreds of them. Paratroopers from the elite 3rd Fallschirmjäger Division, veterans of Crete and Italy. They walked openly down the road, confident. Why wouldn't they be? They'd seen no resistance. Behind them, half-tracks, trucks, armored cars, all bearing the SS runes. Bouck counted 100, 200, 300. The column kept coming. He got on the radio. Static. The battery was dying in the cold. He looked at his men, 17 soldiers, their faces pale in the dawn light. Every tactical manual said the same thing. Scouts don't engage superior forces. Observe, report, withdraw. But withdraw to where? There was nothing behind them. Bouck made his choice. "Let them get close," he whispered, crawling from foxhole to foxhole. "Wait for my signal. Make every shot count." Private First Class Risto Milosevic checked his M1 rifle. His hands shook, not from fear, but from cold. He'd grown up hunting in Minnesota forests. Those skills would matter now. Sergeant William Slape, the platoon's senior NCO, positioned himself behind one of the .30 caliber machine guns. He'd been in the Army for years. He knew what was coming. Tech Sergeant Louis Khalil manned the other machine gun. At 19, he was one of the youngest. He had an easy smile that his squad loved. He wasn't smiling now. The Germans reached the base of the hill. An officer looked up, pointed. He'd seen something, maybe movement, maybe a glint of metal. The paratroopers started climbing, 200 yards, 150, 100. They were bunched together, confident, unprepared. Bouck waited. Every second felt like an hour. 50 yards. Now. 22 American weapons opened fire as one. The effect was devastating. The first burst cut down the lead ranks like wheat. Men fell screaming. Others dove for cover that wasn't there. Some tried to run back toward the village and died in the snow. Khalil swept his machine gun across the German formation, left to right, back again. The weapon vibrated in his hands, spitting brass onto frozen ground. He could see them falling. The first attack broke in minutes, but Bouck knew this was only the beginning. What happened next wasn't 5 similar attacks. It was a brutal chess match where both players knew the endgame was inevitable. The only question was how long the losing side could delay. Checkmate. Second wave. 30 minutes later, the Germans came with a plan this time. Fire and movement, using trees for cover. Machine guns in the village hammered the American positions. But the snow betrayed them. Every movement left tracks. Every muzzle flash gave away a position. Milosevic fired methodically, led the target, account for distance, squeeze. The Germans fell back again. Third wave, different direction. The Germans flanked left, moving through dense forest. Sergeant Slape spotted them first, glimpses of camouflage against white snow. This attack pushed within 50 yards before being driven back. A bullet hit Slape in the leg. He wrapped a bandage around it and kept firing. Private First Class Jordan Robinson took a round through the arm. He switched shoulders and kept shooting. By mid-morning, ammunition was running low. The fourth wave, everything they had, German Colonel Helmut von Hoffmann was furious. His scouts estimated 150-200 Americans in prepared positions. He had no idea he was facing 22 men. He committed his entire available force, 500 paratroopers, reinforced by additional troops, machine guns, mortar teams. Bouck watched them assemble. He could see officers pointing at his positions. "When the ammo runs out," he told his men quietly, "fix bayonets." The Germans came in waves. The sound of their weapons filled the forest. Khalil's machine gun overheated, the barrel glowing red despite freezing temperatures. The .50 caliber jammed twice, had to be cleared under fire. Private James Silva was feeding ammunition when a bullet found him. He slumped over, blood spreading across snow. The Germans pushed to 40 yards. Then Khalil's gun ran dry. Over 2,000 rounds gone. He pulled his .45 pistol. Incredibly, the Germans stopped, fell back again. They'd taken too many casualties to force that final slope. The fifth wave. The breaking point. By early afternoon, German 81mm mortars arrived. Shells walked up and down the ridge methodically. Trees shattered into flying splinters. The air filled with smoke and high explosive. Under the barrage, German infantry advanced. Half of Bouck's men were wounded. Most were down to their last ammunition clips. The machine guns had fired their final belts. The fighting became hand-to-hand. Germans reached the foxholes on the left flank. Men grappled in snow with bayonets, rifle butts, fists. Private First Class Robert Preston killed a German at point-blank range, his rifle muzzle pressed against the man's chest. Milosevic felt something tear through his jacket. Blood spread across his chest between his ribs. He didn't tell anyone. He kept shooting. The line held. Barely. As dusk fell, Bouck faced his final decision. They could try to withdraw through darkness. Some might make it, but that meant leaving the wounded behind. Silva couldn't walk. Milosevic was losing blood steadily. Several others couldn't fight. Bouck wouldn't abandon his men. They would stay. They would fight until they couldn't. The final assault came at dusk. This time, 50 Germans successfully flanked through dense woods, hitting from an unexpected angle. The Americans, exhausted and nearly out of ammunition, couldn't defend multiple directions. Ammunition ran out within minutes. Men threw grenades until those were gone, fired pistols until empty. Some fought with bayonets. Bouck was hit multiple times, once in the face, once in the leg. He collapsed in his foxhole, bleeding heavily. Artillery observer Billy Queen was killed, the only American death at Lanzerath. When it ended, every American on the ridge was dead, wounded, or captured. But here's what the Germans found when they finally took that hill. 22 men, not 200, not even 50, 22. Some German officers refused to believe it. They thought the Americans were lying, that reinforcements must have arrived. The truth seemed impossible. German casualties, 92 total, 16 killed, 63 wounded, 13 missing. A force of 500 plus had been stopped by 22 men for nearly a full day. But casualties weren't the real damage. The real damage was time. SS Obersturmbannführer Joachim Peiper commanded Kampfgruppe Peiper, the spearhead of the entire offensive. His tanks were supposed to be across the Meuse River by the end of the second day. Instead, he sat behind Lanzerath, burning precious fuel, waiting for paratroopers to clear a single hill. He didn't pass through Lanzerath until after midnight, December 17th, 20 hours behind schedule. In World War II, 20 hours is eternity. During those 20 hours, Allied commanders recognized a major offensive was underway. The 101st Airborne loaded onto trucks for emergency movement to Bastogne. The 82nd Airborne followed. Units that would have been caught unprepared had time to dig in. Bridges that might have been captured were prepared for demolition. Reinforcements reached critical crossroads. The fuel Peiper burned waiting at Lanzerath couldn't be replaced. German forces had gambled everything on speed. They didn't have reserves for a prolonged campaign. That 20 hours was recovered never. On December 24th, Peiper's battle group ran out of fuel near La Glaise, surrounded by American forces. He led survivors out on foot, abandoning tanks, half-tracks, and artillery. The northern spearhead, the key to the entire offensive, had failed. Within 4 months, American troops would cross the Rhine into Germany itself. The survivors of Bouck's platoon spent the rest of the war in German POW camps. A German medic treated Bouck's wounds, probably saving his life. He was held at Stalag 13D, then transferred to Stalag 7A. By liberation in April 1945, he weighed less than 120 pounds, 50 pounds lighter than his capture weight. Milosevic survived his chest wound. German medics extracted the bullet in a field hospital without proper anesthesia. He spent the remaining months as a prisoner, recovering from a wound that should have killed him. Of the 22 Americans who fought on Lanzerath Ridge, 21 survived the battle in the camps. That survival rate was remarkable. But here's the thing about heroism. It doesn't always get recognized immediately. For decades, nobody officially acknowledged what they'd accomplished. The Battle of Lanzerath Ridge barely appeared in official histories. After-action reports were incomplete, written in the chaos of the ongoing offensive. Many records were lost. The platoon's stand was overshadowed by larger battles, Bastogne, St. Vith, the twin villages of Rocherath and Krinkelt. The men themselves didn't seek recognition. They'd done their job. That's what soldiers do. Bouck returned home, used the GI Bill to attend Missouri Chiropractic College. Graduated in 1949, practiced for nearly 50 years, married, had children, lived quietly in suburban St. Louis. When people asked about his war service, he gave vague answers. He was in the infantry, served in Europe, was a prisoner of war. He didn't mention the Ridge. Most of his neighbors had no idea what he'd done, but Bouck never forgot his men. For years, he wrote letters to the Army, contacted congressmen, provided testimony and documentation. He wanted medals for his soldiers, for the men who'd stood beside him on that frozen hillside. Not for himself, for them. The bureaucracy moved slowly. Files had been lost. Witnesses had died. Verification took years. Finally, in 1981, 37 years later, the Army acted. On October 26, 1981, the surviving members received their awards at Fort Myer, Virginia. Secretary of the Army John Marsh presented the medals. Bouck received the Distinguished Service Cross, the nation's second highest award for valor. 4 men from the platoon received the Distinguished Service Cross. 5 received the Silver Star. 9 received Bronze Stars with V device for valor. One of the most decorated platoons for a single action in U.S. Army history. Bouck was 57. He watched his men, now middle-aged, gray-haired, receive medals they'd earned 4 decades earlier. Some wept, others stood at attention, straightening shoulders the way they had as young soldiers. When a reporter asked Bouck why he'd stayed when retreat was clearly safer, he thought for a moment. His voice was quiet, but steady. There was nobody behind us. If we left, the Germans would have had a clear road all the way to the Meuse. We were the only thing in their way. He paused, his eyes distant. Those were my men. I couldn't ask them to do something I wouldn't do myself, and I couldn't leave them behind. Lyle Bouck Jr. died on December 2, 2016, at age 92. He was buried at Sunset Memorial Park in Missouri, choosing the family plot over Arlington National Cemetery. Every year on December 16th, a small ceremony is held at Lanzerath Ridge. Belgian villagers and American visitors gather at the memorial marking the site of the platoon's foxholes. The names of the 22 soldiers are read aloud in the cold morning air. The forest has grown back over the shell, craters. The foxholes have filled with decades of fallen leaves. The road is paved now, lined with modern houses. Most drivers have no idea what happened there. But the memorial remembers. A brass plaque reads, "Uncommon valor was a common virtue. In honor and memory of all soldiers who fought here, December 16, 1944. I&R Platoon, 394th Regiment, 99th Infantry Division." That's how wars are won, not only through grand strategies and decisive battles, but through small groups of soldiers who refuse to give ground when everything tells them to run. Through men who hold their positions for one more hour, then one more after that, buying time with their blood for victories they may never see. Through 20-year-old lieutenants who choose to stay because there's no one behind them and because they won't abandon their men. 18 American soldiers and 4 artillery observers stopped an advancing German force for nearly 20 hours. They weren't trying to be heroes. They were scouts doing an infantryman's job because there was no one else. And in doing that job, they changed the course of a battle, perhaps the course of a war. If you found this story as compelling as we did, please take a moment to like this video. It helps us share more forgotten stories from World War II. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories. Each one matters. Each one deserves to be remembered. Leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Our community spans from Texas to Tasmania, from veterans to history enthusiasts. You're part of something special here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for keeping these stories alive.